Hello, my name is Madison Loya, and I'm a fourth grade teacher at Borton Elementary. My presentation is on fostering a global perspective in an elementary classroom. And so I was given the opportunity to do this Fulbright Hays program, and it completely changed who I was as a teacher and how I approached teaching, because this was technically my third time going to China. The first 2 times I went for study abroad, and I went to teach English. And those 2 times I went, I was thinking, what can I do for my students and teach them about America? What personal information about this culture, what things can I get for myself? And the third time I went, I was challenged to think about what can I get from this project and bring to others, bring to my students, and what misconceptions or assumptions I can change with the people around me. And so we're going to go into that. And again, teachers' identities in the classroom are contingent on their backgrounds and life experiences. I believe that study abroad programs allow teachers to bring new identities and culture into our classroom. And so elementary students are going to benefit from these global practices, and they're exposed to new perspectives, and it's going to give them a broader view. It doesn't matter what age you start at. It just starts once you start exposing them to it. I work in a Title I school in TUSD, and for those of you who don't know what Title I is, it was created out of there was a desegregation lawsuit. My school was a magnet school, and with the Title I funding, it's for our 59% that are living in poverty and are on free and reduced school lunches. My magnet school gets this funding for that, and as well as the magnet status from the desegregation law, it brings diversity into my school. My students, it's a global classroom, I want to say. I have students that are African American, Asian, Native American, Hispanic, and Caucasian. My students that are living in poverty are at the higher rate of my classroom percentage. However, it doesn't mean that I can't make this new learning accessible or not accessible to them. So a question I have is, how do we ensure academic success for our students while teaching with a global view? Again, for elementary age teaching practices, I have to align everything with Arizona State curriculum. And so that means that whatever I incorporate into my lessons needs to be intentional, it needs to be authentic, and it needs to follow what the state tells me I need to teach. And when I have students that are sounding out CVC words and don't know the difference between a long A and a short A vowel sound, I get this question of how do I still teach them what they need to learn at their diverse levels of learning, but still teach them about other countries and other people and other languages? How are they going to understand that? When my students think about me going to China, they think of bamboo, pandas, orange chicken, which is not Chinese, and they are shocked when you tell them the orange chicken is not Chinese, and they think of Mulan. Those are their preconceived notions of China. And so what I did was conduct some surveys of what their interests are in world cultures and languages. I found out 65% of my students have interest in traveling the world. 90% of them want to travel within the United States. 60% of them want to learn a second or third language. And 10% of them have never even thought about leaving Tucson. It's not something that they think that they can do. And that's why it gives me even more drive to talk about other worlds to them, other cultures in the world. So one thing I do is alter my classroom language. Greetings are proven in elementary schools, in any school, that it is your first contact with a person, whether it's in the morning, afternoon. It's just your first thing of saying hello, good morning, or in this case, we say hola, buenos dias. We say ni hao or zhang sheng hao in the morning. And my students are bilingual already, the ones that speak Spanish as their first language and English as their second language. It's something normal. However, when they're in the classroom, they mostly speak English because that's what everyone speaks. I want to normalize speaking other languages in the classroom, even if they're learning a little bit of Mandarin here or there, or practicing a little bit of Spanish, because even some of my Caucasian students, they don't know Spanish, and so they're learning that too from their peers. And another thing that I've done in my classroom is I use countdowns, because to get 24th graders' attentions, you need a countdown, and you need to count every second of the day so that they're on task. And instead of saying, give me 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, I taught them how to say it in Mandarin and follow along with me. I'd say, give me wu, se, san, er, yi, ling, and they do it. And they like it. And so, how do I ensure this academic success? While incorporating other groups of people. Mathematics may not be a common area to think you can teach other cultures in that in this academic, but you can. I created a task for math modeling that would have students make a recipe for jiaozi, or known as dumplings. My students can learn that jiaozi is the word for dumplings, and they can learn about a common family practice that's in Chinese homes and for their families, and they do it during traditional times of the year or for specific holidays. And what they do is they build their own recipe using their own skills. So my students that are still working on multiplication, addition skills, they have the option to use pictures, even words, numbers, and they get with the group and they plan it together. And they put their brain power and they can make this. And in the end, we will actually be doing it. Right now, we're learning fractions. And so when they say we're going to need a whole cup of chopped onions, you need a half a cup of shrimp, we need this and that, they're using real world skills while also learning about a different group of people. And they can even connect it to their own life experiences, because I know many of my students make tamales with their families every Christmas. That is something that a lot of Latinx families do. And this is something new that they can make and connect it to their own lives. Another thing that I made as a task it's called a wonder routine. Basically, you show them a picture of something that's different, interesting, that can inspire students to really question what it is they're looking at and saying, what in mathematics can I connect it to? So in this case, it's the Great Wall of China. They can say, I wonder how tall those mountains are. I wonder how long the Great Wall of China is. I wonder how long it took to build it. How many bricks are in this wall? And it starts to create these math questions that they can research themselves and find out on their own. I was reading this essay from, her name is Rudine Sims Bishop, and she writes about how literature are like windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. So children from dominant social groups have always found their mirrors in books. But they too have suffered from the lack of availability of books about others. They need books as windows onto reality, not just imaginary worlds. They need books that will help them understand the multicultural nature of the world they live in and their place as a member of just one group, as well as their connections to all other humans. So how do we as teachers connect our students to the world and various groups of people without leaving the classroom? I think about choosing global texts. In any age, read-alouds for elementary groups are great ways to teach, whether it's math, science, or about other cultures. So they're crucial for our students, and as a teacher, we need to be careful about what we choose. We need to make sure that they're high interests. They don't portray groups of people consistently as victims, and they can be used as a connection builder between groups of people to compare one's culture to another. My read aloud goals are to incorporate world languages, inspire questions about the culture or country while corresponding with AZ state standards. Hannah Is My Name is a book about a family that comes from Taiwan. They immigrate to California, and they are living their daily life adjusting to the States, and they're waiting on a green card. My students that are first generation in the US, based on their families from South America or Mexico, they are able to see that a family that lives on the other part of the world but still comes to America to have a better life, they share something. And even though they have different cultures, different backgrounds, even different places on the globe that they come from, they can identify with the same feeling of what does it mean to be American, and how do we integrate ourselves into this new life. And so also, Avengers, Black Panther, Moana. My students have been able to see that kids in China also love these books. They love those movies. And they can see that, hey, just because they're Chinese doesn't mean that they love superheroes either. They're very different, but they have the same interests. And so books are sometimes windows offering views of worlds that may be real or imagined, familiar or strange. The windows are sliding glass doors, and readers have only to walk through an imagination and become part of whatever world has been created or recreated by an author. The lighting conditions are just right. However, window can also be a mirror. Literature transforms human experiences and reflects it back to us, and in that reflection, we can see our own lives and our experiences as part of a larger human experience. And so, my change in teacher identity from study abroad. I've learned that my students' developing identities are a reflection of my teacher identity in practice. My students are still learning about themselves as well as other people. They may have these already ideas they hear from social media, the news, people they meet in the streets, but they may not always be correct. They may be hearing stereotypes, they may be hearing assumptions, they may be making their own assumptions about things, and I think it's my job as an educator to make sure that they are understanding the world that we live in and how they can coexist with each other. And so I've been more careful about the text that I choose when I read in my classroom. And I want to make sure that my students can find their own identities within the text and be able to relate to different racial or ethnic groups and listen to a different perspective other than their own. I had a student say to me the other day, Miss, I've learned about other cultures, but I still haven't learned about mine. And it makes me think and reflect. You know, we talk a lot about the civil rights movement lately. With Martin Luther King Day, we've talked a lot about China. We've been talking about even Canada, because they've shown interest in Canada. But I need to ask him, what does your family tradition do? What does your family do? And how can I incorporate that in my classroom more so you see yourself in what we're doing? And so I've been more intentional and sensitive to the languages I've been using about cultures and traditions, about different groups of people. Again, when we're reading about Martin Luther King Jr., I've been sensitive to not always portraying African Americans as victims. They have daily things they do like everyone else, and they are successful, just like everyone who's come to the States and worked hard and done what they needed to do for themselves and their family. And so I don't want to create a stereotype for my students. I want them to see beyond that. And my students' interests in traveling have been taken into a greater account when I'm planning my lessons, and I give my students the opportunity to talk about their cultures and ask questions about others. Because they know I've been to China, they've been more interested in China. But that's created a whole new interest in them that already speak English, they already speak Spanish, and now they want to learn a third language. And they've gone home to their families and they've taught them words, and that's been incredible to see. And so as a teacher, I think about my students, the ones I work with, and I've noticed that just not all children have the accessibility to travel. I know when you get to high school, more kids have seen things by then. University professors, they see that their students go to study abroad, they come back, they get these experiences, but I work with students that don't necessarily have those experiences already. So I think it's my job to bring the world to them if they cannot go out in the world themselves just yet. And so, as a conclusion, I can say that study abroad experiences are needed for teachers because it takes us out of the classroom and into a new environment. Studying abroad challenges us to take a step back from our normal practices and teaches us to adapt to a different kind of living. These adaptations bring upon us a different worldview and approach which can be reflected in our pedagogy, thus representing multiple perspectives to our students and building bridges across global cultures. Thank you, and I will pass it on to Sandra.